You don't need to feel guilty or hold yourself back to make anyone else feel comfortable. You don't need to be timid or uncertain, worrying that you are becoming too much for someone else or asking too much from the universe. Living a great life is not about competition with anyone else. Living a great life helps inspire others to do the same. It doesn't take anything away from anyone else. If your dreams both excite and scare you, that's a good sign. Give yourself permission to go for it. Go after what you want with a happy heart. You have every right to be proud of yourself. You have courage. You have listened to your heart, even though sometimes that seemed to be the harder choice to make. You may have days when you don't feel so heroic, but deep within, you know you have guts and you are strong. You know that a challenge is the way that the universe shows you that you are capable of something more. An opportunity is before you now. Has your heart been urging you to take a stand or to take action in some way? Would you feel proud of yourself if you honored that? Then do it. You are learning what it is to truly respect and take pride in yourself. That means feeling good about the sort of person you choose to be, how you choose to live your life, not lowering your standards to be the same as everyone else, but honoring your heart, becoming an inspiration to yourself. You don't need to try to impress anyone. You are an awesome human being, and you have everything within you to make yourself proud. It's time to step up. It's time to be your own hero. Welcome to True and Unpolished with Lydia Singleton and Mary Howe. Our intention is to uplift, amuse, and inspire you to create more of a life you'll love through sharing our always true and often unpolished conversations. Let's get authentic, everybody. And the sacred ritual, I'm going to do it again, Care, if you want to do it with
I
me.
do want to.
Take hold of your own hand and say aloud, I'm proud to be my own hero. Think of any situation in your life where you know you need to step up and be better, be bolder, be wiser. Let yourself be calm and confident so that you feel that your spirit is now a million times bigger than the issue. Open your arms above your head as if in victory and say aloud, I've got this. I trust myself. I have all that I need within me to rise up and be my own hero. I am proud to be me. And I
We,
just got my courage tattoo. See, this is kanji symbol for courage.
oh my gosh. So I have to tell you a synchronicity real quick.
Awesome.
Yesterday we went to Gettysburg. I've always wanted to go. And in the car we were talking about movies, learning more about it. And for some reason I said, we need to watch The Wizard of Oz to the boys. I was like, I don't know how often y'all have seen it or if you have. And they're like, oh my God, we've seen it a million times at school. And I knew we hadn't seen it together at home much. And I said, well, it is such a wonderful archetypal story because
Mm,
of the red slippers, which I think Joe mentioned, because in the end, she had everything she needed to
yeah.
be home. Just tap 3 times and you're home. And Carolyn Mace talks about that story in one of her programs as being to the learning lesson that everything you have that you need is within you
Yes.
from spirit, from you, and it's there all along, and it's just so hard for us to sometimes realize it. So when you said courage, that made me think
Yes.
of the cowardly lion.
Yeah. Yes. Have you ever had the experience of waking up to that understanding? And I don't mean like from sleep, although metaphorically, because it's one thing to say everything you need is within you. Like it's, you can process that from a cerebral perspective, but
Yeah.
there is also a realization of that where you go, oh my gosh, no, really, I have it. I have everything I need. And that feeling is one
Mhm.
of the best feelings ever. And I don't think the words do it justice.
I agree. I think you're exactly right, Lydia. It's hard to, I mean, it's easier said than done. Let's put it that way. It's easier said
Yes,
than
right.
done. And so I think it is the most amazing feeling. And what else was coming up for me with a hero card was worthiness. But when I
Mm,
first started my church communications career, anybody's listening who works with me, I had no idea what I was doing. Um, and I had taught myself some things and I had a magical story of how that all unfolded. But I just had to say, okay, yes, I can do that. I'll figure it out. And
Yes.
so I think in that way, I carry that with me and it's amazing, even though I still sometimes struggle with worthiness. But on my team at work, we always say, we've got this. And it just, even if we don't got it,
Yeah.
shifts the perspective for me anyway. It's like, okay, we got this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
whatever happens, happens. We're going to put in our part, our action, and trust the universe. I have
So what
everything I
about when
need.
you feel like you don't have it?
That's anxiety for me. And I try to notice every time when I am in that place. And sometimes I can't stop it,
Yeah.
but sometimes I will stop and breathe or draw a card to talk about, again, how important cards can be. Um,
Yes.
yeah. And when I'm worried that I'm in my own ego, um, well, then, if you don't got it, then that's the next step on the journey and you deal with that.
Yeah. Right. Not having it is a part of it. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, that is part of it. And that's one of the things the card pointed out is that realization, the recognition that if you're having a challenging moment, if you're not feeling worthy, then that is on purpose. There's something there to pay attention to and to
Yeah.
look at. And worthiness. So, what would you say, Mary? How do you become worthy? Like, how do you gain that?
Well, I used to have this conversation with my friend Mary Hampton. I mean, we had this conversation so many times over,
Mhm.
like too much alcohol and, staying up too late. And I was so stuck on it because I kept saying, your self esteem comes from other people. And what I meant was it comes from your life experiences. And I do think that is true. But she every time would be like, no, Mary, your self esteem comes from yourself. That's why it's called self esteem. And I was like, no, but it comes from your experiences and, your environment. And she's like, well, I mean, I think ultimately we did come to the agreement that, yeah, those things affect your self-esteem, but ultimately we have a choice about what
Mm.
we believe about ourselves. And so,
Ooh.
that I mean, that's why it's called self-esteem. So no matter what horrendous things have happened to us in our life, we have the ability to love and cherish ourselves, no matter what. There's certain people who have lived very charmed, easy lives by, at least outside appearances. And I don't think that's ever true. I don't think no matter how great your life looks, I don't think anybody gets through this life without a
Mm,
lot of pain,
Mhm.
absolutely.
and some or a lot of suffering. So, but even those people, you know, a lot of those people who seem to have a charmed life actually feel horrible about themselves. Everything
Mhm.
given to them, they don't have to work for it. It's
Mhm.
just comes and easy, easy,
Mhm.
easy. But there's difficulty in that too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
sure. And when I heard and understood the card to say, and I got it more the second time when I just read it, feel worthy, because it can feel when we don't feel worthy, it can feel like it's happening to us. Like there's nothing that we can do about it. We just
Mm.
don't like ourselves or we just don't feel worthy. And, what comes to mind from the card was it's an invitation for you. If you're not feeling worthy, it's an invitation for you to embrace worthiness in some way. And then how do we do that? I heard that card to say you take action. do in this moment what you would be proud of yourself for doing.
Mm.
Or and that could be changing your mind about how you feel about yourself. It could be, it's being somebody that I admire. Like, so if I'm having a moment of unworthiness, if I am to say to myself, okay, in this moment, what would it look like to be worthy? And you can even put it
Mm.
outward. You can say, okay, who, if I were looking at someone that was having this experience, what would they do, say, think that I would admire? And then do that. Because worthiness, I think ultimately you have to prove it to yourself, and sometimes we have to
Well,
make it first.
so one of the skills that I teach is cheerleading, and it sounds kind of like that, but I think that when we do it the way that you're describing, maybe risk a little bit of in authenticity. Not I'm sure not all, that's not always the case, and you've talked about that before.
Mm-hmm.
But sort of channeling those parts that you see in somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But the cheerleading skill is just doing something difficult. So it doesn't have to be channeling somebody else. It's just doing something difficult. And then giving yourself praise. I mean, that really, actually, that one skill is the key to building your self-esteem.
Mm.
Doing something difficult. And it doesn't have to be difficult for you. It just has to be difficult for me. So, like, I mean, for some people, sometimes getting out of the bed is difficult.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, folding the clothes or washing the dishes or going for a walk because
Mhm.
you told yourself you were going to do that, So you can't compare what other people are doing in that case to what you're doing. You just have to do what's difficult for you, and difficult for you that day. Might be, getting out of bed might be more difficult some days than others. But the most important part of that cheerleading skill is giving yourself praise. That pat on the back, saying, I am proud of myself because I did that. Because that's what builds your self-esteem. That's actually the number one way to build your self-esteem.
Yeah.
Lydia, you started by saying, even if it's changing how you think about yourself, and we talked about in the beginning of this how it's easier said than done. But
Mm.
there's one school of thought that's, the fake it till you make it, say it until you believe it. I
Mm-hmm.
do believe that that works to an extent, but we have to keep an eye on whether it's really productive or not for us. But it could
Mm.
be a part of a healthy breakfast. It could be one
Yeah, I love it.
piece. Then Mary, what you said about the cheerleading. So that's, a lot like in this where you teach this in coaching. So life coaching, the best thing that I ever got out of learning life coaching skills is to coach myself.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so what you said, like today, the reason I'm wearing exercise clothes, which y'all can't see, is because I went downstairs and practiced my flat foot clogging for 10 minutes.
Oh, nice.
I was like, I gotta do it. And for me, it's those little things that get me
Wait a
through the
second.
day. Hmm.
What is this about
I
clogging?
know. I know.
I know.
Let's not skip right over that.
I'm such a nerd. But a couple years ago, I took some lessons from a very talented person here in Baltimore, and then later someone in North Carolina during the pandemic. It's Appalachian flat footing. So it's not like performative group clogging. It is the traditional dance that comes from it's individual solo percussive dance. It comes from all traditions, Africa, Native American, Appalachian people. Learned a lot of it
Mm.
from their African um, communities at a certain time in history. And so it became, I don't know if you've ever seen like, if I don't know, I can't remember if this is on Andy Griffith or not, but like in a log cabin, people would dance and, play the jug and the banjo. And so I took some lessons and I learned the steps, I learned the skills, and I don't want to lose it. But like the thought of like, I'm going to practice and I'm going to be really good,
Yeah.
too much. I got to break it down.
Yeah.
So earlier this
Yes.
year,
Break it down.
yes, with my crazy busy year, I started out doing it 10 minutes a day and the train left the
Yeah.
station. So I'm coming back, and with coaching, it's like, good for me. I haven't lost it. 6 months may have passed, and I'm just going to go be patient with myself. And
Mm-hmm.
so I like all of that. And then making yourself, just feeling good about yourself. And what you said, Mary, that's one way to build self-esteem. I mean, it can be that small, and it can be hard because it's easy to get caught up in life or just feel like, oh, I don't feel like doing that because I mean,
Yes.
I'm not going to be like super awesome by the end of the 10 minutes.
Yes. And I'll say, what that makes me think of is my mom, one of the ways in which she, expressed love was to always give you an out. So, if I didn't want to
Mm,
do something, and there was always a part of me that didn't want to do whatever it was, right? Like, so
yeah.
it could have been, let's go on a cruise. There's a part of me that's like, no, I think I'll
Mm,
just stay here and sit in this chair. And
yeah.
so,
Mm-hmm.
because she always would give me that out, I have that aspect of me
Wow.
that thinks that the way to
Mm-hmm.
love me is to give me an out. So
Mm,
if I don't want to do it, then the way to love Lydia is to tell her she doesn't have to do it.
yes,
And what I have come to see is that that is sometimes the case, but part of my journey is about recognizing that acting opposite skill that Mary teaches,
Mm-hmm.
because I really, it'll feel like, oh, the way to love me is to give me that out. But what happens when I give myself the out is I don't go do my flat foot clogging, and then I feel bad about myself. And so it just
yeah.
leaves that unworthy feeling.
Oh, I totally have that narrative in me. I mean, so much, partly from being a 9 on the Enneagram. There are a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But that reminds me of the other thing you said was to look at people that you admire who what would they do if they're worthy? And that gets back to our bright shadow and our archetypes. Like when we
Yeah.
talked about Mrs. Maisel and Granny from Downton Abbey, or
Right.
any other book character or waking life person. That is, I love that idea of getting back to the quality and like, well, who do I see that quality in? And then for me, this has worked for me. So I have a really good friend from college and my time at Brevard Music Center. His name is Chuck, and he is the life of the party. And he has just taken music and gone forward with it. And he just, wherever he goes, good chaos ensues. When he would come to town in later years from New York, where he worked in theater, we would say, "Oh my God, brace yourselves! Hurricane Chuck is coming." 'Cause he would be out all night. And so I realized at one point I kept, if he wasn't there in a situation where he should be, I was so bummed because I looked so forward to that. I love to have fun. And
Yeah.
then one day I was like, I'm just going to have to channel my inner Chuck. I mean, and so I started doing it.
I
Like at my
love it.
dream conferences and stuff, like, "Does anybody have instruments? Let's just, make a call. Everybody come on out." And I was like, I'm not him. I'm not the same as him, but it has really been a good thing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What made you want to clog? Like, so in other words,
Oh,
today specifically, you were like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it for 10 minutes. And I heard you say, it's something that you didn't want to lose the skill, but
mhm.
made, I think what I'm asking for is what's underneath that. Like, what is it that doing the clogging was going to give to you?
That's interesting. That's a great question. I think a number of things, that I've been working on in recent years, like exercising. And some people, my husband and I were just talking about this yesterday. Some people say, if I don't do it every day, I just can't do it.
Mm,
And for me, it's like, if I could ever do it every day, it'll be a miracle. So I need to do what I can do so I can feel good about myself. And so I might not, got COVID, couldn't go out and run, but
yeah.
it's that picking back up, like the life coaching where it's like, okay, What did you not do that you wanted to do? And so it's kind of part of an overall, I don't even know what I'm about to say here,
Oh, good.
vision. Mary, kind of like Abraham Hicks, putting it at the bank, just kind of trusting that
Yeah.
stuff that I
Mhm.
do with music and dance, one day I'm going to wake up and be like, oh, hey, look, I got a couple skills here, because that has happened over
Yeah.
time with things. And so it's really, it's really that. My priest, when I was a young adult, once preached a sermon about toothbrushing as a
Oh,
metaphor for faith. And he said, I mean, I remember this vividly. He said, you don't brush your teeth so that you can be guaranteed that you won't get a cavity. You brush your teeth because, from what science has shown us and stuff, that's good for your health. It may prevent cavities. There are a
mm,
lot of reasons to do it, and you do it in faith that hopefully you'll have your overall best health of your teeth and maybe even your whole health. And
mm,
that metaphor really stuck with me. And
mm,
I just feel like if I want my dreams to come true, then
mm.
I have to brush my teeth or put pieces of them, because I'm really bad about the whole, like, I'm going to be an amazing guitar player. I'm going to practice every day. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
And so getting honest with that. And I used to feel, speaking of worthiness, terrible about myself for that. Not understanding my nineness, my ADD, my just all the things. And
Yeah.
now if I do this one little thing, and even at work with my team, like I said, we send out an email. We've all proofed it. Like, we've tried to make it. We're like, yes, we sent out an email.
Yeah. Emails can
Woo!
be
I think
really
we've talked
tough.
about that.
We've talked about that before
Yeah,
and
we have
really
talked
can
about that
be
before. Might seem
intimidating.
small, but it's part of an overall, I guess, learning self-esteem and worthiness and feeling better about yourself would
Hmm.
be my guess.
All right. So I asked this before, and I guess one earlier that, like, what if you just can't get there? And what I'm doing this week and this month, the entire month, I'm doing a detox, and I've done it before. It's been about 10 years that I did it, but it's a 5-day fast, and it's a juice fast and raw food, raw vegan, um, and taking lots of supplements to detox different parts of your body, areas of your body. And the reason I'm doing it is because I felt like I just needed a reset with my eating habits, drinking habits, and just overall self care.
Hmm.
Um, and I have, this is day 5, and I am so irritable, and sometimes I think, like, in situations like this, and this isn't like a normal thing. I mean, it's not something that we should do all the time. It's pretty extreme and that sort of thing. And, the answer could be, well, maybe you're just not eating enough, or maybe you're just not getting enough nutrition or whatever. And that could be, but I think the, the way that I see it is like, there's information, there's trauma, there's toxins that are stored in our body and our joints.
Mm.
And so, like, what this process is doing is like pulling all of that out. It's like I was out running this week, and somebody was cutting the grass, and I was like, wow, that's very, like, messy, because it was, I mean, a plume of smoke, and it's like, well, that's not a very neat process, so a lot of times when we're clearing things out, cleaning things up, it actually is a messy process. I've been feeling very irritable, and also having a lot of negative thoughts
Mm.
Mm.
um over the last week. And so I guess I think it's important that we address that, because it's not all, and I know this because I'm the one, I mean, I teach this stuff. We all teach this stuff, but I also am experiencing it myself. Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to try anymore.
Yes.
Mhm.
Like, sometimes it's just too hard to try anymore.
Mhm.
And so what do you do then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Mary. And I will say that something's a little different for me. I'm glad you're bringing this up for everybody. Is that I kind of felt that way the first 35 years of my life. And then I realized that there was a lot that I could do, even though I was already doing dream work and spiritual work.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mhm.
really kind of started on even more of a journey with therapy and life coaching and stuff like that. So I think I've changed, at least for this decade, is
Mhm.
that I haven't really been too much through those periods of not being able to do it. But one story, and this may be too lightweight, because like you said, sometimes getting out of bed is the hardest
Yeah.
thing you'll do
Mm-hmm.
all day. And I certainly understand that. And I've always said will is not enough. It never worked for me, who I am. Will
Mhm.
is not enough. You
Mm-hmm.
gotta
Right.
want it somehow. How do you want it when you
Yeah. How
don't
do you
want
want
it?
it?
Yeah,
Yes.
because if you don't have self-esteem, I'll say
Uh,
you, but I don't want it
uh,
because that would break my narrative of I'm not worthy if I actually did something.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
um but there's one small trick too that's worked for me. It works for me from time to time. And I might have talked about this before about how I started running probably like 8 years ago now. And again, it's all over the board. I'm no runner, if you will, but I talked to a young woman at church who looked really great, came home from college. I was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And she was like, "Oh, I've been running." And I was like, "Man, everybody is running. What is up with that these days? I hate running." And she was like, "Oh, it's terrible. It's the worst thing ever." And
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, so you hate it and you just go ahead and do it anyway." And it really that was another like pivotal moment for me. So when
Yeah.
I can remember, now I'm more in the habit of my off and on running, but when I can remember and I'm in a place to do it, I sometimes can say, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
just in small sections. Like I said, will is not enough for a successful, happy life, but sometimes.
I get it. And I think too, so what I hear us saying is that there is, yeah, I think it's action oriented. So I think worthiness is actually tied to action, which is strange because
Yeah.
I tend to think of it, or not it, but I think I recognize that, the mind and the emotions are the things we get lost in. So we need to change those. But I think that, oh, yeah, it goes back to the body. Like one of the things that's happening for me right now as we're having this conversation, because right before this and what got us on this was I got, triggered by something. And I've
Mhm.
done, and I've shared this, I've done brain spotting, and that has to do with the body. And so what's happening for me now is there's this release that was coming because of what
Mhm.
happened. And so my body is actually reacting to it. And so I think that oftentimes the body, which is what you need to take action, right? So if you're going to take an
Mhm.
action, you need that body to do it. And I think that what we're looking for in those moments where we're not feeling worthy, I think it might be that we need to say, well, what is it that I'm being called to do? With my body, like what am I being called to actually take action and do in this moment? And yes, it feels right to me to say that what
Mhm.
that means, if you're having a moment where you recognize you're feeling unworthy, there is an action to take. I think that's what I'm saying. And I'm saying it as it's coming to me, obviously. So
Yeah.
I haven't thought about it. It just feels right. What do you think about that?
It's a little bit mind blowing. Like you said, I find my brain even going, wait, how is an action going to make me feel worthy, even though I
Right.
just talked about how it does? And something that came up for me was that combination of mind, body, and spirit. So
Yeah.
brain spotting, Lydia, I know we've talked about this too, and EMDR have helped me a ton to change the
Yes.
negative narratives in my
Yes.
head. And I'm blown away every time about, I mean, the changes are just
I know.
phenomenal.
I
But
know.
then I think also, then spiritual work, and then the stuff that I have done physically. So I'm healthier right now at 50 than I've ever been,
I love it.
mentally, physically, spiritually. And I think all those things kind of interplay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, getting therapy, getting medication
Yeah.
as it's needed. And so I have a homeopathic doctor, but I've is all that has like culminated. So what I was trying to describe earlier, like all the things I've explored and done and tried have now come to this point, and the
Mm-hmm.
journey doesn't end.
Yes.
But yeah, I really like that. And so to Mary's point, like what if we are in like a depressive episode or a
Mhm.
place where we just can't do? Is there a way to say, I can't get out of bed, but I can? I'm looking at reach over and pick up that book. Is that? I mean, is there a way to try to help ourselves? And Mary, I'm going to ask you as a therapist.
Well, yes, I think there is, and there's not. And I
Mhm,
think that's the thing that I'm thinking about. I mean, like sometimes maybe it should be okay to have a pity party
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
and say,
totally.
wallow in, yourself, not necessarily self-loathing, but like just sort of your pity party.
Let it
Mm-hmm.
be.
Like,
Yeah.
um, or, say, you know what, I'm going to ruminate about this because that's what I want to do right now. But
Mm-hmm.
then maybe, after I'm done, then I'll leave it here or whatever. So there are ways to kind of be intentional in your self pity or your ruminating. Um, because I think sometimes you just are where you are. Like in my
Mhm.
physical body, I can feel,
Yes.
and I'm very sensitive because I've always been very sensitive emotionally and physically, energetically, in particular. So so when I do something like a detox, then I physically feel it in my body. I think we all do to an extent,
Mm-hmm.
but if you've done that kind of thing over a period of time, then you really are very sensitive to it. So I can almost like feel that energy moving in my body, the toxins moving,
Mm.
hopefully out of my body. I mean, that's the reason I'm doing it. Um, and so also kind of being gentle with yourself in those moments too, just letting like rest. Like
Yes.
sometimes the action is inaction.
Right. Well, the
Mhm.
action could be taken at. The action could be, um,
Right.
but I think though ultimately when or at least so I'll just speak for myself. So when I get to the bottom of the unworthy feeling, what is there is helplessness.
Mm.
Like it's hopeless. There's nothing that can be done. I mean, it's got that kind of energy to it
Mm.
for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, I think that's why I think that there's an action that's available to us. Does it mean that we need to take the action right now? No, there's no such thing as need. But ultimately, it will be an action that helps us to move out of it, that helps us to get there.
Well, and I think what you're saying makes me, I mean, I think the word is surrender.
Mm,
Surrendering to the moment, surrendering to the
yes.
pain, surrendering to the process.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um,
Mary, you said surrendering, and something that I try to do more now is to sit with the uncomfortable feelings. I have one
Mhm.
dream teacher who's brilliant. She said it 1,000 times. I've heard it, but I heard it for real last December when I was at Canuga. Is like, it's about awareness. So if we are having difficulty being getting out of bed, can I be aware enough to say, okay, right now I can't get out of bed, and just stay with it
Mm-hmm.
with that intention that I think you were talking.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
in of itself is an act. Surrendering, like Mary said. Something I've tried to do more is to sit with the uncomfortable
Yeah.
Mhm.
emotions, because I'm not my personality type, and me, I'm not really good with connecting with them in the first place. And so sitting with fear and anxiety, awaiting for something to arise with intention and awareness is an action.
Mm.
Instead of, for me, what I might would do is try to run away, or, oh, I'll just go flat foot clog and feel good about myself and forget about. Now, I do believe the exercise part helps with fear and anxiety, but yeah, it's like to really be aware, okay, I'm doing this clogging right now for these other reasons. Now I got to go sit and think about the fear and anxiety I'm feeling over this other thing. But I have this dream teacher who's said it for years, and I've heard it 1,000 times. But it finally clicked for me last December, is like, okay, catch yourself when you're feeling unworthy, when you're spinning out in anxiety, and just sit with it and just don't try to fix it. Just
Right.
be with it. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that's what came up for me when you were talking, Mary. And
Mhm.
if we have the will to do that, that's one helpful thing.
Yeah. And I think that what we've done is a lot of create mores, which is, you know, to me, as we were talking, what I realized is that the reason why we're talking about this is because, in addition to us, because of course we need it as well, there are people listening that are like, well, that's great. Yeah, I want to feel good about myself and I don't.
Hmm.
So what do I do now? And I think that what Mary touched on was that, let yourself have a pity party. And what I always say is set a timer. And the timer can be all day today. I'm going to have a day where I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to feel sorry for myself. I'm going to do all those things. But ultimately, you do have to get out of bed to feel better about yourself. Like if I'm in
Hmm.
the bed and I can't get out, it will ultimately be that I need to get out of bed.
Hmm.
So I think that, um, and I said this, so I don't want to keep saying the same thing, but I really intuitively feel like the thing that I am inspired to highlight is if you are feeling unworthy, there is an action to take. There is
Mm.
something that unworthiness is calling you toward.
No matter how small.
That's right. And who knows what that thing is, but I do feel like, and so that's what I'm asking myself. So I had a moment, and certainly unworthiness was there because when I was having the moment and I had this moment where, okay, I'm being triggered by something, I'm feeling very vulnerable, and I have a commitment to do this podcast for everybody that's listening, but also showing up, for the two of you. And so there's this voice in my head that's like, don't be a mess. Like, what are you going to do? Like, you're triggered, da, 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 da. And
Hmm.
what that card was inviting me toward was, hey, wait a minute, there's something you're supposed to be doing. And it said that it was like, there is something tied to this that you need to do. And so that's what I'm asking myself. What
That
is that
is
thing?
so cool. And
Well, I think you just did it.
yeah, I'm inspired to say, this is the power of lots of techniques, but using the cards. Lydia, do you
Yes.
have any comments about how things have shifted from pulling that card from
Oh,
an
yeah.
hour ago to now, or not,
Oh,
just
it's shifted big time. I was, when I pulled that card, I was, I was shaky, like literally shaky.
mm-hmm,
Um, and the reason why I went to the card is because I knew I was triggered. And so the last person that I wanted advice from was triggered Lydia. Like, what do I do now? I know who not to ask, and that's me. Because in this moment, I'm not the one that's going to give me the sage advice. However, I do know that when I draw a card, the advice is going to come from me ultimately. It's coming from my soul, but I need an external something to do it for me.
Back to those red slippers, ruby red slippers.
Yeah, explain what you mean, because I love it.
The Wizard of Oz, in the end, when Dorothy learns she just has to click her heels 3 times,
Yes.
I'm relating that now to, like, pulling the card.
Yes.
And
Yes.
because you said the advice is ultimately still gonna come from me, I just didn't want
Yes.
it from triggered Lydia,
Yeah.
like the divine inner Lydia.
Yes.
And it's such a beautiful process to watch ourselves when we can let go and be aware and project on a card, like, what messages are coming up for me. And then it
Yes.
just things start shifting. It's sitting with what's uncomfortable and then things start
That's right.
shifting. It's
Yeah.
amazing to me. Never cease to be amazed.
Well, Anita Morjani, who had that near-death experience, her book "Dying to Be Me," she had this huge experience of essentially dying, and she ultimately decided she was going to come back, quote unquote, come back to life. That she had a moment where she could make the decision. Was she going to leave and be done with this human experience, or was she going to come back? And she ultimately decided to come back. And she said the reason why she did is because what became completely clear to her through that experience was the entire point of her life was to love herself. That was the whole point. There was nothing
Wow.
more than loving herself. And so she decided to come back specifically to love herself in a way that she had never loved herself before.
Wow. This is making me think of one last thing and that gets back to, like, okay, how do I love myself? But obviously
Mm-hmm.
she had some plan or notion of how to
Mm-hmm.
start.
Mm-hmm.
But I did a Peloton yoga class the other day, and I hope I'll get this right. She said she would mess it up too. A Viktor Frankl
Oh,
quote
mm-hmm.
that for every stimulus, there is a response, and
Mm-hmm.
between them is a pause. And
Yes.
in that pause lies our freedom.
That's right.
So that's the sitting with it to
Yes.
me and holding it between the
Yes.
action and the
Yes. Yes.
response. So
Yes.
maybe pauses are longer sometimes than others.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me personally, I'm quite good at the pause. The problem for me sometimes is the, press and play again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that all of that's necessary. The pause is necessary, as is the action that comes, after the pause.
Yeah, we're all wired differently, right?
Mm-hmm. Mayor, what do you think?
Yeah.
I think that this has been a lovely discussion. And I think that I've got a lot out of it too. And I think I wasn't in a good, we didn't talk about it beforehand, but I wasn't in a good place when we started today. But I think the card really helped me to kind of focus on how I could contribute, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So everybody, please remember to subscribe and like us and follow us. And I'm seeing all those numbers go up. So thank y'all so much. And Carrie, as always, you're just such an integral part to this whole project. That your presence and and you are a gift.
Your
So we're
wisdom.
grateful. Yes,
You
grateful,
guys
grateful
are
to you.
too kind.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm grateful.
yeah. Okay,
We're
everybody.
just being true and unpolished.
That's right. And it's quite lovely, our unpolishedness. You have been
Yes.
listening to True and Unpolished, the podcast. Let's see what happens next.